This is a story about Ralph Yarl. I'm not interested in talking about the story of a teenager getting shot. Why? Because teenagers get shot all the time. Because trespassers get shot all the time. And these stories aren't always justified hero stories. Sometimes they're tragic stories of accidents. Why did this story get national attention? It makes no sense. Why? I've growing up in Chicago, I can't tell you how many times there's stories of a white dude shooting a black kid or a black guy shooting a white kid or something like that happening. And no one in the country cares about it. But this one time, this one story all of a sudden becomes a major headline. It's almost like they're trying to distract from something. They're trying to capture media attention or push some objective or agenda or something like that. And I got to tell you, I'm not super concerned about this story. Let me see if I have the other story. What do we got? Is it over here? No, it's not there. Is it? Actually, I don't know if I have it pulled up. The tweet I was going to pull up, I referenced earlier, is a woman being mercilessly beaten in Chicago by a large group of black teenagers. Now, hold on. A lot of people pointed out she's not actually the subject of the beating. She's just being attacked so that they can beat someone else. And I'm just like...
Much better.
Yeah, okay. Like, wait, what? So the video is they grab her by the neck and they pull her by her neck back and then slam her to the ground or something. And then I guess start pummeling and beating some guy. And that we're supposed to be like, oh, okay, grabbing this woman by the throat and slamming her to the ground and then stomping on this guy it's okay now. But my point is this. Why didn't any of these stories about the cars getting torched become the national conversation? Where was the activists' protest? Where was the outrage? I think this explains it. Why is this story in the news? Because people protested. When a white woman gets beat in Chicago, can you rely on any conservative to go march in the street? Of course you can't. They don't care. They'll post on Twitter and go, man, look at that. And then they'll crack open a Bud Light and have a sip. Okay, maybe not so much Bud Light anymore. But some of them still are probably cracking open Bud Light, being like, what do I care? And that's the issue. The left is fervent and willing to push and fight for anything. And the right is kind of just like, meh, what am I going to do about it, right? Here we are.
There's definitely a movement to transform the United States government into something more mob rule, I think, with mass movements and pressure. And that's why they're so active trying to do it.
Well, those of us who know and love Chicago, and I also grew up in Chicago suburbs, Oak Park and Skokie.
I do have the video, actually. We can pull it up.
We understand that where all this happened was by Millennium Park, which is basically the heart of the city. It's the touristy area. And it's shocking that something like that would happen there. And it's a repeat in the sense of the 2020 riots when looters went down Michigan Avenue. This was no longer confined to the south side and the west side. This was now happening in full view. And it's one of the reasons people voted out Lori Lightfoot. But they've voted in Brandon Johnson, who's even more to the left. And yeah, but he's been saying crazy things about this.
But you know why?
Teachers unions, I mean, basically.
No. It was all race. I tracked the racial the voting patterns and then the racial demographics of Chicago, and it's 1 for 1. The only exception is the university area overtly voted for Johnson, whereas every other part of the city basically just voted for, like, the white neighborhoods voted for the white guy, the Hispanic areas voted for the Hispanic guy, and the black neighborhoods voted for Lori Lightfoot. So my prediction was, if all of the black neighborhoods top 3 candidates were all black, even though so in the heart of the black neighborhoods of Chicago, their first choice was Lori Lightfoot. Their second choice was Brandon Johnson. Their third choice was, some other guy. But when you look at how they voted, the white candidates don't even register at all.
Right. Voting in Chicago is kind of a racial census and always has been. Paul Vallis, the guy who narrowly lost in this election, is the latest in a long line of liberal white reformers in Chicago who can't get elected. And Vallis is a household name in Chicago because he ran the Chicago Public Schools. He was appointed by Mayor Daley. And Daley ran the Chicago machine. It was corrupt, but he ran it with some nod, at least, toward the idea that residents deserve some value for their services. And he appointed Vallis to clean up Chicago Public Schools. He did a pretty decent job. Obviously, they're still not great. But you just can't win running in a general election in Chicago like that. The only reason Rahm Emanuel did is he was seen as Obama's surrogate in Chicago, and that's why he got elected.
So my prediction was, if the university sector is going to vote for Brandon Johnson and the black neighborhoods are going to vote for whichever candidate who's running is black, and the white neighborhoods are going to vote for whichever candidate is white, it's going to be Brandon Johnson who wins because the tiebreaker goes to the far left extremists. Conservatives don't have any footprint, don't have any organizing, don't have any base. So the only politically active sector was the far left extremists. And so it was fairly obvious who was going to break the tie.
Right. And the white voters in Chicago, very few of them are conservative. It's not like the racial breakdown maps onto any kind of political breakdown. The irony is that Chicago white liberals are very far to the left, as you mentioned, around the universities and things like that. So for them, they hate conservatives. I'm generalizing, of course. There are some conservatives, there are some Republicans, but they would never be caught dead voting for a Republican, and yet they're stuck in this kind of racial vortex where they're living in a city where they basically have this democracy that doesn't work. Yes, they threw out the bad mayor, but they're going to get someone who's possibly even worse.
Let's pull this image back up. You can see it right here. And I have one thing to say to this. Actually, let me ask you, Joel. Does that screenshot anger you in any way? Does it make you angry?
Absolutely.
It does.
It's awful that anybody gets beaten up like that. And
well, I got to stop you right there. Do you not believe that women have the right to vote?
Of course they do.
Okay, well then why are you angry? Are you angry that this woman's choice you think is wrong? No. I respect this woman's right to choose. And if she voted for this, well, who am I to be angry that she's getting what she voted for? Right? Women have agency. They can vote for whatever they want. And I believe that if I were to make a wager on who she voted for, likely she voted for the Democrats. She probably voted for Brandon Johnson. I mean, that's the most likely outcome. The guy won. So my view is this. Obviously, no one seriously wants anyone to get attacked like that. But at a certain point, I have to say, I will not project my values onto someone else. We will go and vote. And then if you are successful in, supporting your ideas, you win. I look at the people of Chicago with all the rioting and the looting, the vandalism, the chaos and the shootings. And I'm just like, once again, the people of Chicago have gotten what they voted for. Why should I be upset about that? I don't live there. Like if a bunch of people in France voted to make it so that everybody gets a free baguette in the morning, I'm not going to complain about it. I'm not going to cry and scream and demand an end to socialism. I'm like, I don't live in France. So let them vote for what they want.
The tragedy is that so many people who just want to live regular lives are leaving these places, so there's almost no prospect of political change. And it's possible you might have seen Republican candidates, for example, do better in the midterms in some of the blue states of the Northeast if more people hadn't moved to Florida. And, good for them. But these places are not benefiting from democracy because, yes, they can sometimes get rid of the worst candidates, but they can't elect anyone who's going to make a difference and make anything better. And so there's this vortex in these cities and states that are just going to continue to fail. And what you saw this week with the House Judiciary Committee having those hearings on crime in New York was that, as Mark Levin pointed out, it took a House Republican majority to give voice to these Democratic voters in New York City who had been ignored by their own party for decades and who finally had a chance to tell their story. And all Democrats could tell them was that they were props for Donald Trump.
That is hilarious.
Smart, brilliant, masterful move by Republicans to say, we're going to come in here and we're going to try and address the issues that are concerning to you. Brilliant.
Yeah, and it took them to do it, but there's no mechanism in these cities to make these people's lives any better. And yes, they keep voting in the same governments, but they're not really presented with choices.
Well, let me ask you, are you for Trump or DeSantis?
Trump right now.
Trump. If Trump gets elected in 2024, and then as soon as he's inaugurated in 2025, he immediately begins arresting these politicians in New York and Chicago and LA and SF, and then appointing interim government, would that be a bad thing?
I don't think he should arrest them, but I think he can.
Like Cuomo?
Cuomo, well, which one? The
politician,
the former governor? Because
Yeah.
he's sort of.
He killed a bunch of people in nursing
Well,
homes.
okay. I think it's tough to call for the arrest of the opposition, but I think he could certainly take legal action against these cities. One thing I wish he would do or would have done in LA.
But
let me just finish the thought. I think there are other things the federal government can do that have nothing to do with dealing with opposition politicians. I think FEMA should come into LA and declare it a disaster for the homeless problem. It's the only way we're going to solve the homeless problem is to get that level of intervention.
But my question was, would it be a bad thing?
I think so. I think you can't arrest the opposition. I didn't like it when Trump
Even
said
for the
lock her up.
crimes they committed?
I don't know if you define that as a crime. If you're in political office and you make terrible, terrible mistakes like Andrew Cuomo made with sending...
But he was told he was going to kill people. He was warned by his medical advisors that putting COVID patients in nursing homes would kill them. And he didn't want to put it... He had the comfort ready and available and the Javits Center. And I guess he didn't want Trump to get a victory. So my view is...
Will people testify to that?
That was in the news. I don't know. It was like... I think the New York Times reported, I'm pretty sure, that he was warned.
He was warned fairly early on. But at that stage, though, I think there was so much conflicting advice. I'm not trying to make excuses for him. And actually, I was one of the people who reported pretty extensively on that story of the nursing homes in New York. But I just don't know that you can hold politicians criminally liable for terrible policy mistakes, as long as they're not breaking the law. Obviously, one of the worst decisions made during COVID was that decision, especially when they had the Army Field Hospital and so forth. But
the reason I ask is that the reason I ask is because quite literally what the Democrats are doing, yes, is going after their opposition with arresting them, like targeting Trump specifically.
Right.
But they obviously won't stop there. They're look at how they handle the protests at the Supreme Court justices' homes. Law enforcement for Antifa, non-existent. Law enforcement for Proud Boys, lock them up. So it's active and it's happening. And conservatives are the ones who play the game where it's like, well, we shouldn't return those tactics. We shouldn't do the same thing. And it's like, okay, well, Trump will be convicted. There is no circumstance in my mind where a New York jury will acquit Donald Trump. That just seems impossible to me. But maybe I'm wrong about that. And then people are going to be like, well, it's a state issue, so he can't be pardoned at the federal level. So even if he gets elected, he'll be in prison in New York City or state. So I don't know how that works. But they're doing it. They've been doing it. And then I look at what's going on in all these cities. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I think it would be a good thing that you get some like autocrat to go in and start purging and getting rid of the opposition or anything like that, because they would do the same thing. But I kind of feel like at this point, that's the only thing that's going to happen. Either it's going to be Democrats doing it to Republicans like they're already doing now, or Republicans doing it to Democrats. It doesn't matter what you think is good. It doesn't matter what you want to happen. What matters is Democrats are currently doing it. And if Republicans don't, then Republicans will just be the ones getting locked up, and then you'll live under the boot of the Democratic Party.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, I've actually said publicly that once they indicted Trump, I said, well, the very first thing that should happen when a new Republican administration takes over, whether it's Trump or somebody else, is they should immediately indict and arrest Joe Biden and his family for all the influence peddling they've done, for all the financial crimes. And that's not speculative. That's public record. I hear Democrat spokespeople going on Fox and saying things like, well, where's the evidence? Well, the laptop you've been ignoring for 3 years, as for one thing. So I think they've set a precedent. And the only way you get back to a reasonable middle is if the Democrats know that you're capable of retaliating. I think that's one of the reasons there's still a filibuster, by the way, because when Harry Reid got rid of the filibuster for some of the judicial nominees, and then Republicans came in and got rid of it for all judicial nominees and put Republican nominees on the Supreme Court, Democrats learned the hard way that by busting these norms, they set themselves up for failure. And I think that's one of the reasons they didn't get rid of the filibuster during the first 2 years of Biden's term, when there was a lot of pressure to do it. He's talking about doing it still, but they know now that you could very well be on the other foot after 2024. It probably will be in the Senate because it's such a favorable map for Republicans.
But that's still stamp collecting compared to what the Democrats are doing.
Correct.
They're actively trying to imprison Donald Trump at the federal level, at the state level in New York, and in Georgia. And the Republicans are like...
Don't forget the Hague, war crimes or crimes against humanity. They'll. You're absolutely right. They'll go after him wherever they can, and it's disgusting. I think
so. The end result is either Donald Trump goes in, immediately instructs his new AG, his acting AG, once he's in, to file criminal indictments for all literal and provable criminal charges against as many bureaucrats and politicians as possible. We can't just sit back anymore and be like, well, we know they're corrupt, but going after them would destabilize the system. It's like, you kidding? The system's destabilized.
No, I agree with you. If you have literal and provable criminal charges, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Obama killed a 16-year-old kid, Cuomo, Newsom, Whitmer. Who else do we got? A handful of governors killed a bunch of, nursing home residents. So I think those right off the bat are plain and obvious. You've got constitutional violations in every single blue state, which does violate federal law. There's a federal law of a public official who intentionally deprives someone of their constitutional rights. It's actually a crime. So he could actually indict all of them on all of this. Heck, he could even indict Ron DeSantis. Not that that would go over very well, because Ron DeSantis was one of the governors who actually lifted the restrictions and let the state reopen. But in New York, shutting down churches And then when the Supreme Court was like, you can't do it, he goes, okay, I'll just issue another executive order and do it again. Like, oh, come on. At a certain point, it's like, you're committing crimes and abusing your power. So I kind of feel like that's the only path that results in any real change. The end result is if Donald Trump, I'm saying outright, arresting people for actually crimes that they're indicted for. I'm not saying to randomly go in and just be like, well, we're going to arrest him for no reason. I'm saying like actually be like, okay, well, that guy didn't actually do that, so you're good. This guy clearly has a list of things he's done that's corrupt. Okay, we're going to charge you. We can't just sit back and be like politicians are above the law anymore, especially considering Democrats made the same exact argument. That's the game that we're playing right now. They say that, well, Donald Trump, may have filed the books wrong, so he's got to go to prison. And I'm like, okay, well, Barack Obama blew up a kid in Yemen. Jail. Lock him up. If Donald Trump has to go to prison for 6 months because he filed his books wrong, well, it's unfortunate. I look forward to seeing Barack Obama serve life in jail for killing Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki.
If you will if putting Donald Trump in jail for 6 months or whatever will get Barack Obama in jail for killing an American citizen, I will drag Donald Trump's ass to jail kicking and screaming myself. I will go to Florida and get him. To put Obama in jail for violating the Constitution? Absolutely.
But beyond just that, I mean, he murdered more than, I think it was like 4 American citizens. I could be wrong. I know Anwar and Abdul Rahman.
I think it was like 6.
Was it 6?
I've heard 6. I've heard 4 before.
What about George Bush Jr. and Dick Cheney?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Are you kidding?
See, the problem is if you went into office as the president and you're like, Schedule F, I'm going after all of them. You hear me? You're all indicted. Everyone's indicted. You'd wake up dead the next morning.
Well, yeah.
You wouldn't wake up the next morning. You'd be dead. No one would lose their job.
Yeah.
I disagree.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, I disagree. We're not in the era. We're in the era of character assassination. Look what they're doing to Trump. They're doing everything in their power to try and stop him. And you don't want to make a martyr of people. The CIA learned this a long time ago. They've turned the people they were trying to fight. They created immortal statues of, and they're like, okay, we shouldn't do that anymore. So what do? Julian Assange is a good example. Julian Assange didn't wake up dead. They just locked him in a box for a decade and accused him of being a rapist.
Absolutely right that it is character assassination. That's why they're trying to prevent Trump from running for president. I think he has a near 0% chance of becoming president at this point.
Let me ask you something.
I don't know, man. Like Epstein is dead. So, I mean, I do think that they will go with options depending on the person. So maybe you're right about Donald Trump. They would go for character assassination.
But Epstein wasn't a strong public figure.
Yeah, but the CIA is not above killing people.
Well, sure, I get it. But what I'm saying is Epstein's not a good example because he was trying to be in the shadows.
Fair.
Let me ask you something about the interference in elections aspect of this. So you asked whether I would support DeSantis or Trump, and I hesitated but said I'd support Trump. I'm on record several months ago as saying I would prefer to see another candidate emerge for a variety of reasons that aren't terribly surprising. But when they indicted Trump, I said, this is forcing people like me to become Trump voters, whether we wanted to or not, because this is now the issue. If you can do this, if you can corrupt the system like this, the only way to protest against it is to make Trump the president. There's no other way to do it. Are we being pushed into this? Is this a successful ploy by the Biden administration to craft an opponent that it thinks it can beat? They were wrong about that in 2016 as well, but how do we react to that as voters? How do we reason through that?
I don't think the same strategy would work. I think they were lucky that everything was locked down and people had to vote by mail. People didn't have sports, people didn't have movies, people didn't have entertainment. The only thing they could do was vote. And so that they hyper-focused everything. That will not work again, especially with the horrifying job Joe Biden has done. There's no, they're showing all these polls where they're like, if it's Ron DeSantis, Biden loses, but if it's Trump, Trump loses. And I'm like, yeah, we get it. There's elements of the machine that really love Ron DeSantis. I like Ron DeSantis. I think he does a really great job. But boy, do they hate Donald Trump to the point where they lied about all of the polls. Not to mention, how many people are still secret Trump voters who don't want to admit they're going to vote for Trump? I can tell you this. I know of one celebrity family that publicly is as liberal can be and privately voted for Trump twice. Yep. And I'm not going to say who they are. It's not my business. But there's tons of these people. And the funny thing is a lot of these celebrities, taxes, only reason, legit. Only reason taxes. Yep. They couldn't tell you about the culture war. I was talking to someone and they were like, oh yeah, that's the celebrity guy in that movie. Yeah, he voted for Trump. And the only reason he said was because Trump was going to lower his taxes. Right. Only thing he cared about. Publicly, he's woke. Publicly, he's on Twitter and like, oh, Trump is so bad. And he's like, I better vote for that guy.
You know what I'm doing, Joel, is like just trying to keep an open mind and watch for the best candidate. Because I think Vivek Ramaswamy is far superior mentally than either Trump or DeSantis. He's almost a billionaire, self-made by like 35 years old.
Yeah, he's amazing. Let me throw out another name there. I had an opportunity to see most of the potential contenders. Some of them have already dropped out, but last year at a couple of meetings I was at, Nikki Haley had an energy when she was on stage that was just different and interesting, and she's really struggling in the polls right now, and I know that a significant portion of the conservative base doesn't trust her, but does she have a shot? Is there some lane where she can emerge somehow out of this mess?
I imagine the chat is freaking out right now.
Good. So what is it? But let's talk
Trump
about it.
in 2024. That's Jeff Walsh.
But Nikki Haley is what they're freaking out about.
The Republican Party is, look, the neocons fled to the Democratic Party. They're not coming back, and the Republican Party is where it is now. It is the Trump Party. So you can entertain anybody you want.
So if concern that Trump is made, they're like, no, he can't even run. It's illegal. Is that's in that reality, which it looks like we're headed towards. I mean, unless you say a New York jury is going to acquit this guy.
Even if they convict him, I think he can still he can run. And I think for that reason, I think I would vote for Trump, just to say, you can't do this to us.
I don't know a lot about Nikki Haley. I remember. Has she been political a long time?
Yeah, I actually met her at a conservative blogging conference. This is way back in 2009. Red State, which was one of the first conservative blogs, had a conference, and she was there. So was Ted Cruz, people who didn't hold any kind of real serious public office. I think he was Solicitor General of Texas or something, but she was just running for governor of South Carolina, and she came and talked to these bloggers. I met her, got to know her a little bit. I didn't think she was necessarily qualified to be UN ambassador, but Trump put her in there, and she did a fantastic job. She's had some good things to say, some things I've been critical of and that sort of thing, but just the energy when she's on stage and I'll just put it on the table, having a female candidate is different. It's different than what we're seeing, and so it's compelling for that reason. Again, maybe not compelling enough because she's below 5% in the polls and that sort of thing, but are there alternatives? Again, I say this as someone who's also said, if they do this to Trump, there's no other option. You have to resist the system by voting for him. It's not even about the issues anymore. There's only one issue, and it's freedom and justice and the rule of law, and there's only one vote you can take. That's how I feel about it.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.